The scorching desert sun beat down mercilessly as Willa Reed crawled across the parched earth, her cracked lips bleeding and her throat so dry it felt like sandpaper. 3 days ago, she had been traveling with the Sanderson gang, believing their promises of gold and glory in California. 3 days ago, before she discovered their true plan to use her as bait in a bank robbery. 3 days ago, before she refused and they left her to die in the New Mexico desert, taking her horse supplies and every drop of water. "Won't last a day," Bill Sanderson had laughed as they rode away, leaving her bound and gagged. She'd managed to free herself from the ropes, but freedom meant little in this endless expanse of sand and sun. Willa collapsed, her face pressing against the hot ground. The year was 1868, and she was 22 years old. Too young to die, she thought bitterly, though the desert seemed to disagree. A sound penetrated her haze hoofbeats, rhythmic and steady. Hallucinations, she decided, her mind playing cruel tricks before death claimed her. But the sound grew louder, more insistent, until a shadow fell across her face. "Good Lord," a deep voice exclaimed. "Are you alive, madam?" Willa forced her swollen eyes open. A man had dismounted from his horse and was kneeling beside her. His face was partially hidden by the wide brim of his hat, but she could make out a strong jaw dusted with stubble and concerned eyes. "Water," she managed to rasp, the word barely audible. Without hesitation, the stranger uncapped his canteen and gently lifted her head. "Slowly now," he cautioned as he tipped the container to her lips. The first drop of water felt like a miracle. Willa wanted to gulp it down, but the man controlled the flow carefully. "Easy. Too much at once will make you sick." After a few measured sips, he pulled the canteen away. Willa whimpered in protest. "More in a minute," he promised. "What's your name and what in tarnation are you doing out here alone?" "Willa," she whispered. "Willa Reed, they left me." The man's expression hardened. "Who left you?" "Sanderson, Bill Sanderson and his gang." Recognition flashed in the man's eyes. The Sanderson gang, they're wanted in 3 territories. He gave her another small drink. "I'm Vincent Harrington. Most folks call me Vince." Vince helped her into a sitting position, supporting her weight against his chest. "I'm taking you to town," he said, his voice leaving no room for argument. "Can you hold on if I put you on my horse?" Willa nodded weakly. With gentle but strong hands, Vince lifted her onto his horse before mounting behind her. One arm wrapped securely around her waist as the other held the reins. Willa leaned back against his chest, the steady beat of his heart lulling her into a state between consciousness and sleep. "Stay with me, Miss Reed," he murmured against her ear. "Town's about 2 hours' ride." "I need you to stay awake." "Why?" she mumbled. "Because I'm not entirely convinced you don't have a head injury and sleeping might not be the best idea right now." His voice was kind but firm. "Tell me where you're from." "Philadelphia," she answered, forcing her eyes to stay open. "Came west after my parents died. Typhoid." "I'm sorry to hear that," Vince said sincerely. "What brought you to New Mexico territory?" Willa laughed bitterly, the sound scraping her raw throat. "Dreams of a new beginning, foolish dreams." "Dreams aren't foolish," Vince countered. "It's trusting the wrong people that gets us into trouble." As they rode, he periodically offered her small sips of water and kept her engaged in conversation. Willa learned he was a rancher with land near Santa Fe, that he was 28 years old, and that he was returning from delivering horses to Fort Sumner when he found her. The sun was beginning its descent when they reached the small town of Socorro. Vince took her directly to the doctor, a grizzled older man named Dr. Peterson, who examined her with clinical efficiency. "Severe dehydration, sunburn, and exhaustion," the doctor pronounced, "but nothing that won't heal with proper care. She's lucky you found her when you did, Harrington." "Another few hours and we'd be digging a grave." Willa shuddered at the blunt assessment. "I'll arrange a room at the boarding house," Vince said, standing from the chair he'd occupied during her examination. "No need," Dr. Peterson replied. "My wife can look after her here tonight. Tomorrow, if she's stronger, Mrs. Peterson will help her bathe and find some clean clothes." Vince nodded, then turned to Willa. "I'll check on you tomorrow, Miss Reed." "Thank you," she whispered, her voice still raspy. "I have no way to repay you." A smile softened his features. "Your life is payment enough." True to his word, Vince returned the next afternoon. Willa was sitting up in bed, dressed in a simple blue dress borrowed from Mrs. Peterson. Her face was still reddened from the sun, but her eyes were clearer. "You look considerably better," Vince remarked, removing his hat as he entered the room. "I feel better," Willa replied. "Dr. Peterson says I can leave tomorrow, and go where?" The question hung in the air. Willa looked down at her hands. "I haven't figured that part out yet." Vince pulled up a chair. "I've been speaking with Sheriff Taylor. He's mighty interested in your encounter with the Sanderson gang. They robbed the bank in Las Cruces last week, killed 2 men. Willa's stomach twisted. "I didn't know about any killings." "They said they were headed to California to prospect for gold." Bill Sanderson seemed charming at first. She paused, embarrassment coloring her already red face. "I was stupid and naive." "No," Vince said firmly. "You were betrayed. There's a difference." His words were kind, but they didn't solve her predicament. With no money and no family, her options were severely limited. As if reading her thoughts, Vince cleared his throat. "I have a proposition for you, Miss Reed." Willa tensed, having heard similar words before with unsavory implications. Noticing her reaction, Vince quickly added, "A respectable one, I assure you. My sister-in-law runs a small school on my ranch. She's increasing in family way and needs assistance with the children. It would provide you room, board, and a small salary until you decide what you want to do." Hope flickered within her. "Why would you do this for me? You don't know me." Vince's expression grew serious. "I know you survived what would have killed most men. That speaks to your character, and," he hesitated, "I believe people deserve second chances." There was a story there, Willa thought, but she didn't press. Instead, she asked, "When would I start?" "I'm heading back tomorrow. You're welcome to accompany me, provided the doctor gives his approval." Dr. Peterson not only approved but seemed eager to see Willa settled somewhere safe. The next morning, she found herself in a wagon beside Vince, heading north toward Santa Fe. The journey would take several days, and Willa was still recovering her strength. They stopped frequently, and Vince was careful to ensure she stayed hydrated, often passing his canteen without comment. On their second night, camped beneath a vast canopy of stars, Willa finally asked the question that had been nagging at her. "Why were you really in that part of the desert? It seemed far from any logical route between Fort Sumner and Santa Fe." Vince was silent for so long that Willa thought he wouldn't answer. Finally, he sighed. "I was tracking the Sanderson gang." Willa sat up straighter. "You're a bounty hunter?" "No," he replied, poking at the campfire with a stick. 3 months ago, they raided a stagecoach. My brother was the driver. They shot him, left him to die much like they left you." His voice was even, but Willa could hear the underlying pain. "He survived long enough to identify them." "I'm sorry," Willa whispered. "The law moves too slowly sometimes," Vince continued. "I've been tracking them between my regular work. When I heard they were seen near Las Cruces, I made the horse delivery an excuse to search that area. And instead of finding them, you found me." Vince looked up, the firelight illuminating his face. "Perhaps that's for the best." Vengeance is a cold companion. They lapsed into silence, but something had shifted between them. A shared understanding, a recognition of parallel pain. The following days brought them closer to Santa Fe and closer to each other. Willa learned that Vince had inherited his ranch from his father 5 years earlier. His brother, Thomas, had married a schoolteacher named Catherine, and they had lived on the ranch until Thomas decided to try his hand at driving stage coaches for the extra income. Catherine was devastated, of course, Vince explained as they traveled. She was 4 months along when Thomas was killed. The baby, a boy, is now 2 months old. They named him Thomas after his father. "That must be difficult for her," Willa observed. "It is, but Catherine is strong." She continued teaching the children from neighboring ranches, even through her grief. It's only recently that the demands of motherhood have made it challenging for her to manage alone. By the time they reached the Harrington ranch, Willa felt she knew Vince better than she had known anyone in years. His quiet strength was comforting, his integrity evident in every action. The ranch itself was impressive, not ostentatious, but well established, with a main house, bunkhouse, barn, and a smaller building that served as the schoolhouse. Several cowboys were working with cattle in a distant field, while closer to the house, a woman hung laundry on a line, a bundle strapped to her chest. "Catherine," Vince called as they approached. The woman turned, shading her eyes against the sun. She was petite with auburn hair and a face that showed both fatigue and resilience. "You're back early," she called, then noticed Willa, "and you've brought company." After introductions and a brief explanation, Catherine welcomed Willa warmly. "We can certainly use the help," she said, adjusting the baby sling. "Little Thomas here demands most of my attention, and the children's education suffers for it." Willa was shown to a small but comfortable room in the main house. After weeks of travel and her ordeal in the desert, the clean bed and privacy felt luxurious. That evening, over a simple but hearty dinner, Catherine explained the schoolhouse routine. "We have 12 children, ranging from 6 to 14. Most ride in from neighboring ranches, though a few board here during the week if their homes are too distant. Classes start at 8 and end at 3 with a midday break." Willa nodded, taking mental notes. "What subjects do you teach?" "Reading, writing, arithmetic, history, and some basic sciences. The older children help with the younger ones. It's not Philadelphia," Catherine added with a smile, "but we do our best." "It sounds perfect," Willa replied honestly. That night, lying in bed, Willa reflected on the strange turns her life had taken. A month ago, she had been desperate enough to join a traveling party of strangers. A week ago, she had been left to die in the desert. And now she had a job, a roof over her head, and something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. The weeks passed quickly. Willa discovered she had a natural talent for teaching, and the children responded well to her. She assisted Catherine during the day and helped with little Thomas in the evenings, allowing the new mother some rest. Vince was often busy with ranch work, but he made a point to check on the schoolhouse regularly. Willa found herself looking forward to his visits, enjoying their conversations about books, current events, and life in the territory. One evening in late October, nearly 2 months after Willa's arrival, she was sitting on the porch swing, enjoying the cooling air when Vince joined her. "The children seem to adore you," he remarked, sitting beside her. Willa smiled. "The feeling is mutual. I never imagined I'd find teaching so fulfilling. Catherine says you have a gift for it." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the swing moving gently beneath them. "I received a telegram today," Vince finally said. "Sheriff Taylor from Socorro. The Sanderson gang was captured in Arizona territory. They'll stand trial for multiple charges, including the murder of my brother." Willa felt a complex wave of emotions: relief, satisfaction, but also a strange emptiness. "Will you attend the trial?" Vince nodded. "I owe it to Thomas. I'll leave next week. How long will you be gone?" "At least 3 weeks, possibly longer." He turned to look at her directly. "Will you be all right here?" "Of course," she assured him, though the thought of his absence created an unexpected ache. "The ranch won't fall apart without you." "That's not what I'm asking," he said quietly. Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them. Willa's heart quickened. "I'll be fine," she whispered, not entirely sure she was telling the truth. The day of Vince's departure arrived too quickly. He had arranged for his foreman, an experienced cowboy named Jeb, to oversee ranch operations. Catherine and Willa would continue with the school as usual. As Vince mounted his horse, Willa handed him a small package. "Some biscuits for the journey," she explained, feeling suddenly shy. "And a book. The nights can be long when traveling alone." Vince's hand covered hers as he accepted the gift. "I'll be thinking of you," he said simply. "And I you," she replied, her voice barely audible. He tipped his hat and then he was gone, the sound of hoofbeats fading into the distance. The days without Vince dragged on. Willa threw herself into teaching, developed new lessons, and spent evenings helping Catherine with household tasks. But she found herself watching the horizon, hoping for a rider that didn't appear. 3 weeks passed. Then 4. A telegram arrived in the 5th week, addressed to Catherine. The trial was proceeding slowly, with multiple witnesses and legal delays. Vince expected to be away at least another 2 weeks. Catherine handed the telegram to Willa after reading it. "He mentioned you," she said with a knowing smile. Said to tell you he's halfway through the book and enjoying it immensely. Willa blushed, folding the paper carefully. It's just a book, she murmured. Catherine replied, clearly unconvinced. That night, Willa penned a letter to Vince, describing the happenings at the ranch, the progress of the students, and little Thomas's attempt at crawling. She hesitated before concluding, then wrote, "The ranch feels different without you. I find myself watching the road each evening, foolishly hoping to see you returning. Be safe and know that you are missed." She signed it simply, Willa, and arranged for it to be posted the next day. A week later, disaster struck. Little Thomas developed a fever. Despite Catherine's careful nursing and Willa's assistance, the baby's condition worsened. By the second day, his breathing was labored and his tiny body burned with fever. "We need to get him to a doctor," Catherine said, her voice trembling with fear. "The nearest one is in Santa Fe." Jeb immediately arranged for a wagon with the softest possible bedding. "I'll drive you myself," he assured Catherine. "I'm coming too," Willa insisted, already packing necessities. The journey to Santa Fe was agonizingly slow, every jolt of the wagon causing Catherine to clutch her son tighter. They reached the town as evening fell and immediately sought out Dr. Langston, whose address Catherine knew. The doctor diagnosed pneumonia and admitted the baby to his small infirmary. "The next 48 hours are critical," he warned. "You can stay with him, of course." For 2 days and nights, Catherine rarely left her son's bedside. Willa alternated between helping with the baby and ensuring Catherine ate and rested occasionally. On the third morning, little Thomas's fever broke and his breathing eased. "He's going to recover," Dr. Langston announced with a smile. "Children have remarkable resilience." Relief washed over both women. As little Thomas slept peacefully for the first time in days, Catherine turned to Willa. "I need to send a telegram to Vince. He should know." "I'll go," Willa volunteered. "You stay with Thomas." The telegraph office was busy, but Willa finally got her turn. She crafted a brief message explaining the situation and assuring Vince that both his nephew and sister-in-law were now well. As she turned to leave, a familiar voice called her name. "Miss Reed, Willa Reed," a well-dressed man approached, his face vaguely familiar. "Forgive me," he said, noting her confusion. "Harold Webster. We met briefly in St. Louis. I was a colleague of your father's." Recognition dawned. "Mr. Webster, yes, you attended my father's funeral. Indeed, what an unexpected pleasure to find you here in Santa Fe. Last I heard, you were heading to California." Briefly, Willa explained her current situation, omitting the more harrowing details of her journey. "Teaching suits you," Mr. Webster observed. "Your father always said you had a quick mind. But if you ever desire a change, I now represent the Westward Publishing Company. We're establishing offices throughout the territories and seeking educated individuals to assist with our operations." He handed her a business card. "We pay quite well, think about it." Willa tucked the card into her pocket, thanked him, and returned to the infirmary with bread and cheese for Catherine. She didn't mention the encounter. It seemed unimportant in the face of Thomas's recovery. 3 days later, Dr. Langston pronounced Thomas well enough to travel, though he advised a slow, careful journey. They were preparing to leave when a commotion outside drew their attention. Vince burst through the door, his clothes dusty from travel, his face lined with worry. When he saw his nephew in Catherine's arms, awake and alert, the tension visibly drained from his body. "Thank God," he breathed, crossing the room in 3 long strides to embrace his sister-in-law and gently touch the baby's cheek. "I came as soon as I received the telegram." "But the trial," Catherine protested. "You were supposed to stay." "Family comes first," Vince said firmly. Then, turning to Willa, he added softly, "All of my family." The moment their eyes met, Willa felt a warmth spread through her chest. Without thinking, she stepped forward into his embrace. "I missed you," he murmured against her hair. "I missed you too," she whispered back. The journey home was slower but infinitely more pleasant with Vince present. He drove the wagon carefully, mindful of its precious cargo, while Jeb rode alongside. Willa and Catherine sat in the back with Thomas, protected from the sun by a canopy Vince had rigged. During one rest stop, while Catherine was nursing Thomas and Jeb was tending the horses, Vince pulled Willa aside. "I need to tell you something," he began, his expression serious. "The Sanderson gang was sentenced yesterday just before I left. Bill and 2 others will hang, the rest face long prison terms." Willa absorbed this news silently, then asked, "How do you feel about it?" Vince considered the question. "I thought it would bring more satisfaction, maybe even peace. But mostly, I'm just glad it's over. Thomas wouldn't have wanted me to dwell in hatred." He took her hands in his. "Finding you in that desert changed something in me, Willa. It reminded me that even in our darkest moments, unexpected blessings can appear." His words touched her deeply. Before she could respond, Catherine called that Thomas was ready to continue the journey. The moment passed, but the feeling lingered. Life at the ranch gradually returned to normal. Little Thomas grew stronger daily and the school routine resumed, but something had shifted between Willa and Vince. Their conversations became longer, their moments together more frequent. Often, they would sit on the porch after dinner, talking until the stars filled the sky. On one such evening, as November turned to December and the air carried a distinct chill, Vince asked about her plans for the future. "Catherine will eventually return to teaching full-time," he pointed out. "Have you thought about what you'll do then?" Willa hesitated, then reached into her pocket and produced Mr. Webster's business card. "I received an offer in Santa Fe," she explained, "a publishing company. The pay would be good and it would be respectable work." Something flickered in Vince's eyes, disappointment, perhaps even fear. "Is that what you want?" "I don't know," she admitted. "A few months ago, I would have jumped at such an opportunity. Stability, independence, these were all I sought. And now," Willa looked up at the vast New Mexico sky, stars scattered like diamonds across black velvet. "Now I understand there are things more valuable than independence, community, purpose." She turned to meet his gaze. "Connection." Vince's hand found hers in the darkness. "Stay," he said simply. "Not just as a teacher or Catherine's helper. Stay with me." "What are you asking?" Willa whispered, her heart pounding. "I'm asking if you could see a future here, with me." His voice was steady, but she could feel a slight tremor in his hand. "I know it's been only a few months, but I've never felt this way about anyone." Joy bloomed within her, unexpected and overwhelming. "I feel the same," she confessed, "but I have nothing to offer you, no dowry, no family connections." "I don't want those things," Vince interrupted. "I want your spirit, your resilience, your kindness. I want to build a life with the woman who survived the desert and captured my heart in the process." Tears sprang to Willa's eyes. "Then yes, I'll stay." His kiss was gentle at first, then deepened with a passion that took her breath away. When they finally parted, both were smiling. "We should probably tell Catherine," Willa suggested, slightly dazed. Vince laughed. "She's known how I felt longer than I have. She'll be insufferably pleased with herself." True to prediction, Catherine was delighted by the news. "Finally," she exclaimed, bouncing little Thomas on her hip. "I was beginning to think I'd need to lock you two in the root cellar to get you to admit your feelings." The wedding was set for spring, but winter brought its own excitement. Christmas at the Harrington Ranch was a community affair, with neighboring families gathering for a feast and celebration. Willa, who had spent the previous Christmas alone in a boarding house, found herself surrounded by warmth and acceptance. Vince presented her with a delicate silver locket containing a tiny portrait of himself that he had commissioned during his trip to Arizona. "So you'll always have me close to your heart," he explained as he fastened it around her neck. Willa's gift to him was more practical, a fine leather-bound journal and a new fountain pen. "For recording ranch business," she said, "or perhaps writing down your thoughts when words are difficult to say aloud." The winter months passed in a blur of preparations. Catherine helped Willa sew a wedding dress, adapting one of her own gowns with new lace and ribbons. Vince expanded the master bedroom, adding a sitting area where Willa could read or grade papers. As the wedding day approached, an unexpected letter arrived for Willa. It had been forwarded from Socorro and bore a Philadelphia postmark. The sender was Harold Webster. "He's offering me a position as an editor," Willa explained to Vince after reading the letter. "In Philadelphia, a substantial salary, a chance to return east." Vince's expression remained carefully neutral. "Is that something you want to consider?" Willa looked around at the home they were building together, thought about the community that had embraced her, and the man who had saved her life in more ways than one. "No," she said firmly, tearing the letter in half. "My place is here now." The relief on Vince's face was evident, though he tried to hide it. "I would have supported your decision either way," he insisted. "I know," Willa replied, kissing him softly. "That's one of the reasons I love you." Their wedding day dawned clear and bright. The small church in Santa Fe was filled with ranch hands, neighbors, students, and the few friends Willa had made during her time in New Mexico territory. As she walked down the aisle toward Vince, Willa reflected on the journey that had brought her there, from the desperation that led her to join the Sanderson gang to the desert where she had nearly died, to this moment of profound joy. Vince's eyes never left hers as she approached, his expression one of wonder and devotion. When she reached him, he took her hands in his. "You are the most beautiful sight I've ever seen," he whispered, so only she could hear, "more beautiful than a canteen of water in the desert." She teased gently, his smile deepened. "Even more than that." The ceremony was simple but meaningful. They exchanged vows and rings, promising to stand by each other through whatever challenges life might bring. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Vince's kiss was both tender and passionate, a promise of the life they would build together. The celebration afterward was lively, with music, dancing, and enough food to feed twice their number. As evening fell, lanterns were lit, casting a golden glow over the gathering. Willa found a moment of quiet to stand at the edge of the festivities, taking it all in. Catherine joined her, little Thomas sleeping against her shoulder. "Happy?" she asked simply. "More than I ever thought possible," Willa admitted. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm dreaming," Catherine smiled. "The best dreams are the ones we live with our eyes open." Across the yard, Vince was laughing with Jeb and some of the other ranch hands. As if sensing Willa's gaze, he looked up, his eyes finding hers immediately. The love in his expression made her heart skip. "He's a good man," Catherine said softly. "Thomas would have been so pleased to see him happy again." Willa reached out to touch the baby's soft hair. "We'll make sure this little one knows what a fine man his father was. And what extraordinary uncles and aunts he has," Catherine added, squeezing Willa's hand. Later that night, alone in their room, Vince held Willa close. "No regrets?" he asked. "None," she assured him. "Everything that happened, even being abandoned in the desert, led me to you. How could I regret that?" His hand traced the curve of her face. "When I found you that day, I was tracking killers, my heart full of vengeance. I never imagined I was actually riding toward my future, my healing." "We saved each other," Willa murmured against his lips. "And we'll keep doing so every day," he promised. Spring turned to summer and summer to fall. Their first year of marriage brought challenges: a drought that threatened the cattle, an injury that kept Vince bedridden for weeks, the school's growing enrollment requiring expanded facilities. But they faced each obstacle together, their bond strengthening with each trial overcome. When winter arrived again, Willa had news of her own to share. On Christmas Eve, as they sat by the fire after the others had gone to bed, she placed Vince's hand on her still flat stomach. "Next Christmas, there will be another stocking to fill," she said softly. Joy illuminated his face. "A baby, you're certain?" Dr. Langston confirmed it yesterday when we were in town. She smiled. "He says I'm about 3 months along, due in June." Vince gathered her in his arms, his touch gentler than usual. "I love you, Willa Harrington, more than words can express." "Then show me," she whispered, leading him toward their bed. The next months were filled with preparations and anticipation. Catherine, having been through childbirth, provided practical advice, while the women from neighboring ranches contributed baby clothes and wisdom. Vince converted a small room adjacent to their bedroom into a nursery, crafting a cradle from pine wood with his own hands. As Willa's body changed, she sometimes marveled at the journey that had brought her to this point. From the desperate young woman fleeing grief in Philadelphia to the abandoned victim in the desert, to this a beloved wife, respected teacher, and soon-to-be mother. "What are you thinking?" Vince asked one evening, finding her standing in the nursery, her hand resting on her rounded belly. "About how different my life might have been if you hadn't found me that day," she replied honestly. "I was so close to giving up." Vince wrapped his arms around her from behind, his hands covering hers protectively. "But you didn't. That strength was always in you." "Perhaps," she conceded. "But you gave me a reason to use it." On a warm June evening, after a day of teaching, Willa felt the first contractions. By midnight, Catherine had sent for the midwife, and Vince paced anxiously outside their bedroom door. The labor was long and difficult. Dawn broke, and still, Willa fought to bring their child into the world. Inside the room, Catherine and the midwife offered encouragement and assistance. Outside, Vince prayed as he had never prayed before. Finally, as the morning sun filled the room with golden light, a strong cry announced the arrival of their son. Vince was called in to find an exhausted but radiant Willa holding a small bundle. "Meet your son," she said, her voice tired but joyful. "James Vincent Harrington." Tears filled Vince's eyes as he carefully took the baby in his arms. "He's perfect," he whispered, overcome. "Just like his mother." Life settled into a new rhythm. James was a healthy, robust baby with his father's dark hair and his mother's inquisitive eyes. Willa resumed teaching when he was 3 months old, often wearing him in a sling as she conducted lessons. The students, especially the girls, were enchanted by the baby and eager to help whenever possible. As their first anniversary approached, Vince surprised Willa with news that he had purchased additional land, expanding the ranch significantly. "This is for our future," he explained as they rode out to view the property. "For James and any brothers or sisters that might come along." Standing on a hilltop overlooking the expanded Harrington Ranch, Willa felt a profound sense of belonging. This land, so different from the city where she had been raised, had become home in every sense. "You ever think about what would have happened if our paths hadn't crossed that day?" she asked, leaning against Vince as they watched the sunset paint the desert in shades of gold and crimson. "Sometimes," he admitted. "But then I remember something my father used to say, that the important journeys in life are never straight lines." Willa smiled, thinking of all the twists and turns that had led her to this moment. "He was a wise man. He would have adored you," Vince said, kissing her temple, "almost as much as I do." That night, as James slept peacefully in his cradle and the ranch settled into nocturnal quiet, Vince presented Willa with a small wooden box. "I've been working on this for months," he explained as she opened it. Inside was a delicately carved scene, a desert landscape with a man on horseback discovering a woman lying on the sand. Despite the somber subject, it was beautifully rendered, capturing a moment of salvation. "It's beautiful," Willa whispered, running her fingers over the carving. "Our beginning." "The day my life truly started," Vince agreed. "When I shared my water, I had no idea I was also sharing my heart." Willa placed the carving on their bedside table, then turned to embrace her husband. "And I had no idea that when I accepted that water, I was accepting a future brighter than anything I could have imagined." Their kiss was a promise, a celebration, a reaffirmation of the bond that had formed in the harshest of circumstances and flourished in the fertile ground of mutual respect and deep love. 5 years later, the Harrington Ranch had grown into one of the most prosperous in the territory. The main house had been expanded twice to accommodate their growing family. James had been joined by a sister, Elizabeth, and another brother, Samuel. The school, now in a proper building constructed specifically for that purpose, served not only the ranch children but those from the small town that had developed nearby. Catherine remained the head teacher, with Willa taking on more responsibilities as the children grew. Vince had established himself as a respected rancher and community leader, frequently consulted on matters affecting the territory's development. But his greatest pride was his family, a fact evident to anyone who observed him with Willa and their children. On the anniversary of the day Vince had found Willa in the desert, they established a tradition of riding out alone together, revisiting the bond that had formed in those first critical hours. "You remember what you first thought when you saw me lying there?" Willa asked during one such ride as they rested beneath the shade of a rare desert tree. Vince considered the question. I thought you were a mirage at first, he admitted. Then I thought you were probably dead. When I realized you were alive, my only thought was that I couldn't let you die. And I thought you were an angel, Willa confessed with a smile, or a hallucination before death. Just a man in the right place at the right time, Vince corrected, pulling her close. My man, Willa murmured against his chest. My savior, my partner, my love. The sun began its descent toward the horizon, bathing the desert in warm light. In the distance, the Harrington Ranch was visible, their home, their legacy, the physical manifestation of a love that had begun with a simple act of kindness. We should head back, Vince suggested reluctantly. The children will be waiting, Willa nodded, but lingered a moment longer in his embrace. Thank you, she whispered. For what? For finding me, for saving me, for loving me. Vince tilted her face up to his. Loving you is the easiest, most natural thing I've ever done, like breathing. As they mounted their horses and turned toward home, Willa reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought her to this point. The desert that had nearly claimed her life had instead given her a new one, filled with love, purpose, and joy beyond measure. The Harrington Ranch flourished through the years, as did the family that called it home. James grew into a thoughtful young man who shared his father's love for the land. Elizabeth, with her mother's intelligence and determination, excelled in her studies and dreamed of becoming a doctor. Little Samuel, the most adventurous of the three, kept everyone on their toes with his explorations and discoveries. In 1886, 18 years after Vince had found Willa in the desert, they celebrated another milestone, the opening of the first proper school building in the now established town of Coloma, New Mexico. The town council had unanimously voted to name it the Reed Harrington School, honoring both Catherine's years of service and Willa's contributions to education in the region. At the dedication ceremony, Vince stood beside his wife, pride evident in his expression as she addressed the gathered community. Gray now streaked his dark hair, and lines of experience marked his face, but his eyes still held the same warmth and integrity that had captured Willa's heart all those years ago. Education is a canteen in the desert of ignorance, Willa said, concluding her speech. It sustains us, nourishes us, and enables us to continue our journey toward a better future. This school will provide that sustenance for generations to come. The applause was enthusiastic, especially from the front row where James, Elizabeth, and Samuel sat alongside Catherine and her now-grown son, Thomas. Later that evening, as they walked home hand in hand, Vince squeezed Willa's fingers gently. You were magnificent today, he said. I couldn't be prouder, Willa smiled up at him. It feels like the completion of a circle somehow, from desperate survival to creating something that will help others not just survive, but thrive. You've always been a builder, Vince observed. Even when you had nothing, you were planning for something better. As they approached their home, the setting sun cast long shadows across the land they had nurtured together. The ranch house, expanded and improved over the years, stood as a testament to their shared vision and hard work. Inside, the walls were adorned with family portraits, children's artwork, and mementos of their journey together. On the mantel above the fireplace, the wooden carving Vince had created still held a place of honor, a constant reminder of their beginning. That night, with the children asleep and the house quiet, they sat on the porch swing as they had so often throughout their marriage. Vince's arm rested comfortably around Willa's shoulders, her head leaning against him as they gently swayed. 18 years, Willa mused. Sometimes it feels like yesterday that you found me in the desert. Other times it seems like another lifetime. In many ways it was, Vince replied. We were different people then. Were we, Willa questioned, or were we always who we are now, just waiting to find each other? Vince considered this. Perhaps a bit of both. You were always strong even when circumstances tried to break you, and I always believed in justice and second chances even when vengeance clouded my vision. And you were always generous, Willa added softly, sharing your water with a stranger. Best decision I ever made, Vince said, kissing her temple. Though I maintain it wasn't entirely selfless, even half dead and sunburned, you were the most intriguing woman I'd ever encountered. Willa laughed, the sound as musical to his ears now as it had been when he first heard it. Charmer. They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the night sounds of the desert so different from the threatening emptiness Willa had experienced during those desperate days alone. Now the desert was home, its rhythms familiar and even comforting. You ever wonder about the Sanderson gang? Vince asked suddenly. About Bill, Willa was quiet for a moment before answering. Occasionally, I heard he died in prison a few years ago. Vince nodded. Sheriff Taylor mentioned it in his last letter, consumption apparently. I can't say I mourned him, Willa admitted. But I've long since let go of my anger. In a strange way, his cruelty led me to the greatest happiness of my life. Still, Vince said thoughtfully, I sometimes wonder what makes a man choose such a path, what experiences shape someone to value gold and power over human life. The same experiences that shape others to value compassion and justice, Willa suggested. We all face darkness. The difference lies in how we respond to it. Vince smiled, once again struck by his wife's wisdom. Have I told you today how much I love you? You have, Willa confirmed, but I never tire of hearing it. I love you, Willa Harrington, he said, turning to face her fully. More now than the day I married you, which I wouldn't have thought possible then. And I love you, she replied, reaching up to trace the familiar contours of his face. My rescuer, my partner, my heart. Their kiss was gentle, a comfortable expression of a love that had deepened and matured through the years, yet still held the spark that had ignited between them in the most unlikely of circumstances. As they prepared for bed that night, Willa paused at the window, looking out at the vast New Mexico sky. The moon cast silver light across the land, transforming the desert into a landscape both mysterious and serene. What are you thinking? Vince asked, coming to stand behind her. That life is strange and wonderful, she replied. That the place that almost killed me became the place where I truly began to live. Vince wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. And that the woman who had nothing to offer but herself gave me everything I never knew I needed. Together they stood, watching the moonlight, secure in the knowledge that what had begun as a desperate encounter in the desert had blossomed into a love that would endure through challenges and joys, through children and grandchildren, through all the seasons of their lives. In the quiet of their room, surrounded by the home they had built together, they were still at their core the same two people who had connected in that moment of crisis, a woman fighting for survival, and a man offering salvation. But they were also so much more partners who had faced life's challenges side by side, lovers who had discovered the deepest meaning of commitment, and friends who had found in each other the most profound understanding. What had begun with a shared canteen had grown into a shared life, proving that even in the harshest environments, love could not only survive but flourish, transforming the barren places into gardens of possibility and hope.